So, moving on. And what else? If you look at age, in aging economies like the UK, and then as you get older, you eat fast food less often. What about, as I mentioned, fish? You eat more fish because it's perceived to be healthier, if you will. So depending where you are in the market, there are opportunities but also threats. And of course, in older societies too, you get, at both ends actually, younger and older, you get increasingly smaller scale households. What proportion of households in the UK would be one person? The sad sack one-person household. The tiny minority. What percentage? One-person households.
55.
It's at 32%. I mean, very, very roughly, a third of households in the UK are one person, a third are two people, and a third are three people or more. Very, very roughly. Okay. What does that mean? Well, it means that if you're by yourself, it's most unlikely to say, I think this evening I'll prepare myself a nice, healthy stew. Why would you? You pop out and you buy a meal for one. Nip into Tesco Express and pick it up as you go. Clear implications here. If your households of one and two, you're more likely to eat out. You can see? You want convenience. Why would I bother cooking just for me? Doesn't matter if you're young or old. When my mother, in her declining years, when my dad had died, she sort of gave up cooking. She was always a great cook. But she said, but when it's for me, why would I? And she was off to Waitrose to buy the little meals. There we go. So, low or no market growth in developed countries with low or no population growth. Actually, in the UK, we have population growth, but where you've got population growth slow declining, aging population with reduced food intake, concerns about meat, fat, impact on health. The fact of the matter is that if we're in meat, or particularly red meat, there is a concern that overconsumption affects health. There's these social pressures, these more esoteric things, concern about greenhouse gas intensive products, guilt about, dear God, if I have something which is grain-fed, this is more North American and Australian and Australasian than European. You know, is it moral to feed grain to cattle when we see pictures of children with extended bellies in Africa because they're starving? And so for lower income groups, I see in developed countries a migration to lower priced products, which is code for intensive white meats. But the brilliant thing is for higher income groups, higher priced special treat meat meals have appeal. So I eat less meat, but when I eat meat, I want to eat better. And I want to buy the premium stuff and the really, really good stuff because I don't have that much. You know, so an example might be, oh, hang on, let's go on. That dry aged beef, for example. What I'm saying is that back here, we've got to get used to, I think, to movements. I think we can call it a movement like Meatless Mondays. And I don't think we should panic about this, for goodness sake. You know, I work in countries where meat consumption is 130 kilos per capita, when I'm in the US or Canada. And I'd say, how have you got time to come and listen to me? You should be home just stuffing yourself with meat. You know, dear Lord, you know, isn't there a day in the week when we could have less? So, okay, next one. So, what about retail? And excuse me,
you're all right at the minute.
yes, hang on. I want to know exact 11:25. Yeah, good. So, what's happening at retail? I mean, it's really intriguing, and it's not just the UK, but this is a UK example. You get this sort of polarization through the recession, where actually who's doing well? It's people doing well either end of the value continuum, if you will. So Aldi and Lidl in the UK clearly are doing extraordinarily well. Clearly. How many people here shop in Aldi and Lidl? No need to feel embarrassed. No, there we go. There we go. More of you should. More of you should. And for two solid reasons. One is astonishingly low prices. And the second reason is gives you an opportunity to meet people you normally wouldn't see socially. So that's at one. So astonishingly low price, and then but look how Waitrose is doing. I mean, doing really, really well. So not everybody's, you know, feeling bad about the recession, and it's the Asda's and the Tesco's and the Morrisons, particularly at the moment, that are really struggling to maintain market share. And it just shows you that it's not only about value, low price. Even within a recessionary environment, it's also about premium, but it's actually getting the right value there. People are willing to spend more for more, and that's the trick, working out what is that more they'll spend more on. And also, it always intrigues me, doesn't matter where I go in the world, you know, you can have this sort of concern about, it's all about value, it's the McDonald's value meal, the £1 burgers, how can they do that? And yet, in the US, for any of you who travel there, there's a chain which is going like a rocket at the moment called Five Guys. And I was in Montreal the other day where I had a 5 guy hamburger, and I had the petit hamburger, because I couldn't face that one there. I think it's 2,200 calories. And it's going, phew. And there, a hamburger and chips is $12. You know, like that's £8. You think, ooh, that's quite a lot for a burger in a fast food chain. But that's doing well. So it depends where you are on that continuum. Moving on. So, what's happening around the world? This is not just UK, but it's really intriguing in the UK certainly, but also in North America. Those big barns, those Tesco extras, those great huge Walmart, dreadful warehouses are really suffering. And what it would appear, particularly in the UK, is through the recession that we're going to those big hypermarkets less often, and when we go, we buy less. And the retailers know it. And instead of doing that, it's actually paradoxical. We're shopping more often in convenience stores. So, and of course in the UK, the convenience stores are owned by the retailers. It's the Tesco Express, it's the Sainsbury's Local, it's the little Waitrose, increasingly it's Asda with their Netto, it's the Marks and Spencer's Simply Foods, etc. And what drives that, it's intriguing, I think, shoppers in some respects say, if I go to those big barns less often, I'll buy less. I don't know if that works. But they're also starting to factor in how much does it cost me to go and to come back. And if I go and come back with too much, is there too much waste? And in fact, they see it as saving to some extent, paying more in convenience, but just buying exactly what we want and buying it late. It's so intriguing. Actually, that's not necessarily good for us because it drives, for example, ready meals. If you're shopping in a big Tesco, you won't buy 6 ready meals because you won't consume them in the next 3 or 4 days, and therefore you're afraid they'll go off. On the other hand, if you pass at the Tesco Express on a regular basis, you can just pop in, particularly if you're one of those third of all households that's just one person, or 2/3, which is 2 people or less. So we've got the hypermarket, which has been squeezed, convenience growing, food retail and food service converging. So, you know, that sort of the restaurant sector converging with grocery. Show you that in a minute. And then this, of course, which is led by the UK, this online shopping, which is nothing short of a phenomenon, and I think has huge upside in the UK and in many markets too. So, I haven't got time to really dwell on it. So here we've all seen this, no doubt. This is Tesco in Seoul, Korea, where they're the number 2 retailers, Tesco in South Korea. And this guy is in the subway, so in the tube, going towards the tube, and here's a virtual shop, and he is just with his smartphone, he is doing the shopping on his way to the tube, or whatever they call it in Seoul, and then when he gets home, it'll be delivered by a guy on a motorbike, you know, like the Domino pizza guy. Done. Done. And what about in the UK? We're trying that. Well, Tesco are trying it in Gatwick. So here's the lady doing exactly that. She's going on holiday with the family, and she's ordering in Gatwick what she thinks she's going to need for when they come back, and then picking the slot when they'll be home. So what's the proportion of grocery that's shopped online? Grocery that's shopped online in the UK? It's about 5%. What do I think it will be by 2025? Let's go forward 2024, 12 years. I would be very, very surprised if it wasn't 15 to 20%. So that's close to a fifth of groceries will be shopped online. And what's the most frequently used? It's the click, and pick, which would be my daughter-in-laws with children, both working, shopping at 10 o'clock at night online, and then picking up their shopping either on the way to when they've dropped off the kids for school, or when they're coming back on the way from work. I mean, it's very much a British thing, but we are way ahead here, and I see there's all sorts of implications of this for the food industry. Moving on. But this sort of convergence of food retail and food service, that through the recession, the retailers have just hammered, particularly family restaurants. and not least by this sort of offer. Here's a Waitrose one. This would be Friday, this coming Friday. Susan and I will say, oh, bugger, we can't be bothered with making a meal on Friday night. We're working hard during the day. So we'll nip down. I'll walk down to Waitrose. That's a lovely meal, actually. Slow-cooked belly pork with a Greek side salad, goo, the nice chocolate things, plus a bottle of wine for a tenner. For a tenner? When I show this around the world, people cannot believe that. That's impossible. Yet I talk to the suppliers of these products and they say they make a decent margin because, why? Because the volume is so huge. It's huge. And of course, Tesco could do it for slightly less. Same sort of thing. Here we are, Tesco finest dinner for two. The notion of eating out in, as I say. And again, the problem from our perspective is that our core meat becomes a minor ingredient in the meal. I think we've got to keep that in mind. Yeah. So here we go, the world population. We have to ever talk about it. There's 9 billion by 2050. There's 7 billion now. And, like me, you probably think, what's a billion? Come on, David. A billion. It's trillion is the thing now. A billion's neither here nor there. When this comes home to me is that in 1973, I emigrated with my wife to Canada. And in 1973, the population of the world was 3.5 billion. So in my professional lifetime, we've doubled the population of the world. That tells me that billion is real. And we're going to add another 2 billion. And so is that brilliant? Because actually, look here, if you look at the big numbers, we're going to add 1 billion to Africa. We're going to double the African population over the next 40 years. And we're going to add 1 billion to Asia. And what's intriguing, of course, back to emerging countries, is we get excited about... You look concerned.
You said in 1970 it was 3 billion.
3.5 billion.
So it's doubled in 40 years.
Yes.
And in the next 40 years it's only going to increase by a further 50%. So this population growth will slow.
Yeah, it's starting, and it'll tail off probably at 2050, may peak in 2060. If you get economic development, as you pump income into households, they have less children. Well, we've still got to feed 2 billion people, and that's up to you. Get on with it, as they say. So here we are. We're going to double the population of Africa, and we're going to add 1 billion to Asia. We get very excited about the extra billion in Asia because we know their income's going up like that, and they think that's our opportunity. That's China, brilliant, India, wherever it is. But actually, as an ex-African person, I spent 4 years living in Africa. If I look at that doubling of Africa, I wonder if that's a market opportunity or a social problem. And I think the jury's out to a degree on that. So moving on, hang on. But why we get excited about 15 minutes to go? Why we get excited about developing countries is because that's their demographic profile, whereas ours is like a pillar. Same number of oldies as there are young folk. Here we've got, if you look at the number of under 10-year-olds that there are in developing countries, and that's the next generation of consumers. And if they've got money in their pockets, brilliant from a food point of view, although that brings particular pressures on the environment, doesn't it, if they start eating lots more meat. And so what we've got here is that I just took an African country. Nigeria is the white pyramid, and the red and blue is the demographic profile of the US. That's how they differ. So in Nigeria, there are lots of people in Nigeria, but they die pretty young. But going forward, that probably won't happen if they up their effort, if they up their income, if they up their medical services. And so, okay, let's quickly look at this sort of meat consumption. I've looked at 2007 to 2012, and this is good news for us here, isn't it? If you look over that 5-year period, then global meat consumption increased by 16 million tons. 16 million tons. It's brilliant. That means you're in a buoyant market, global market. But actually, if I look at the detail, most of the growth was in emerging countries, and most was for chicken. And globally, if we take the big picture, beef and lamb were down, or at best static.